So, Partner at Purse Strings, we're all about providing tips, tricks, pieces of advice on how to be financially fearless. And then if you're getting married, planning for retirement, maybe you're getting divorced, want to help your kids go into college, whatever it may be, we have top tier financial professionals willing, ready, and able to serve you. Pam Friedman is one of them, and she is joining us today to talk about managing money and marriage. So, Pam, we're so excited to dive into this conversation. But before we get started, could you give us a little intro of who you are and what you do?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Pam Friedman. I'm a certified divorce financial analyst as well as a certified financial planner. And while I focus on divorce, my real heart is how we manage our money during relationships. Um, I have been doing this and been in the financial industry for over 30 years. I've been a financial planner for 12 years and working on divorce that whole time. And I feel like I have some important things to remind everybody of when they're managing money as a couple.
I'm very excited for this because I know we don't always talk about managing money, personally, much less, with a partner and how to go about these different expectations we might just come to the table with. So I think there's a lot of very interesting parts in this conversation. So if anyone's tuning in live and has questions along the way, please throw them in the chat and we're happy to get to those. And if you're watching the replay, you can throw them in the comments and we'll always work on coming back to those as well. So Pam, let's pull up your slides and get this started.
Great. Thanks, Maggie. And thank you so much for inviting me to do this. And Robertson Stephens, thanks to you as well,
Of
where
course.
I'm a managing director. And that's why you see Robertson Stephens Wealth Management on the page. So managing money as a couple. How is it that we can all end up with financially fit relationships? We focus on, physical fitness and all about joining our hiking groups and our biking groups and our whatever aerobics that you might do. But this is an important area of, let's call it hygiene, that you should focus on as a couple. And yet, like other types of fitness, it's difficult. It takes consistency and it takes effort. And so managing money as a couple is near and dear to my heart. I work with lots of couples who want to do the right thing for each other and have each other's heart in mind as they're making their decisions. But for other couples, it's much more difficult. And that may mean that there's something in someone's background or their attitude or what they were taught about money. Is it the root of all evil, or my family doesn't talk about money, it'll all work out, all those kinds of attitudes. We need to get an idea of where our partner is coming from, whether you're married, getting married, you're in the middle of a marriage, you're not even thinking about marriage yet. Having some of these conversations are great, but how do you get one started?
Mm-hmm.
So I have some ideas about that. Are you on the same page? And does it really matter if you're on the same page? Maybe you just need better understanding of each other. And how can you ask the question without tripping a wire or feeling like you're offending your partner? Maybe it's too soon to ask how much debt someone might have, but you're curious. Start maybe somewhere else. How did you learn about money? Maybe that's too broad. Did your parents pay for your college education? Um, how did you uh, how did you fund your first house if you have a house? All these kinds of sort of side questions lead to real conversations about whether or not financially you're on the same page. I don't think on your first date you should ever ask, what's your credit score? But certainly, if you're getting closer to either living together or getting married, things like credit scores can be quite important. Things like, how much student debt do you have? Am I moving into your house? And what does that mean? Let's get a lay of the land as a couple. And it's great for me because I actually have a millennial niece, and she's awesome and very on top of her financial life, maybe because of me, I'm hoping, but very on top of her financial life. And she and her husband have a set date on Sunday nights. They meet and they ask these kinds of questions, and it's open questions. and they try to figure out, are we still on the same page? Do we have the same goals? And right now their goal is to buy a house, but how much they're willing to spend on a house is a little bit different, and they're negotiating that. So I think it's just staying on the same page.
I love that they set those times apart and have those conversations, especially, I mean, like, we've all seen the episode of House Hunters where somebody else wants to spend $200,000 more than the other, and you're like, oh, are we on the same page here with our goals?
And if you're not on the same page and you just can't seem to get out of it, a financial planner can really help.
Right.
Um, get a good understanding of what your budget is versus what you really want or why you want it. And sometimes people want to be in a certain neighborhood, it's too expensive because they want their kids in a certain school. Does it make sense when the child's 1 versus when the child's 6 and maybe you're further along in your financial life? So a financial planner is great at helping people decide, couples decide, how much to spend, say, on that first house. Of course, we just talked about sharing all that information as you're getting closer to either living together or, um, really being a serious couple or getting married. What kind of debt do you have? What's your credit score? What are your earnings? What are your savings, spending? How have you been investing? How do you intend to invest in the future? Really having a financial planner pull a personal balance sheet together so that your assets and your partner's assets are all on the same page. You can get a really good picture of what you're considering from your assets and your debts.
Hmm.
But be prepared. There might be something that you didn't know or thought you knew, that there may be a wide wage disparity. There might be a wide asset disparity. You may find out that your spouse has a really large trust and lives mostly off of that, even though he's working in a job that's equal to yours, or possibly, not, as you're making more money. Be prepared for some surprises and for, because of that conversation, there to be sort of a shift in the dynamics. So having the conversation sooner rather than later, like the night before your wedding, is a good idea. And then determine together, what are your financial goals as a couple, and how are you going to grow? Not only grow and protect your money, because protection of your money is really, really important. And I know we don't have a lot of time here, but I'm seeing more and more, maybe because I work with mostly high net worth clients, that the children of these clients are living on trusts and inheritances. And so knowing more about how trusts work and what
Hmm.
that means to your relationship is important. So
It's
how
really
are we?
interesting. I mean, it's never come up on any of my dates of someone being paid by a trust, but I think that would really change my perspective of just kind of what our goals are, as maybe one of us is really like have hustled together where someone else has got a trust fund. It might just make you feel a little different, and you need to shift your own beliefs around these things as well.
Right. There's nothing good or bad about
Right,
inheriting money. And you really have to take your judgment out of it and say, well, what does that mean for our relationship and how we're going to spend? Let's just
right.
have that honest conversation and, sit down on a Sunday night, no alcohol, but sit down on a Sunday night and have a real conversation about what it means, from a place of care and concern for the other party, and
Right,
really framing it that way to your partner makes the conversation go that way.
right.
So one of the questions I get asked a lot, and you and I talked about this, and I knew you and purse strings gets asked, should we have a joint bank? Should we have a joint bank account? And
Right.
there's, again, nothing good or bad about having a joint bank account. There's benefits and there's drawbacks in agreeing to a joint bank account. What you can do to offset some of those risks, like someone spends all the money in the account all of a sudden, is talk about how that account is going to be used. We have couples who are, and I talk about this in my book. I have a book called I Now Pronounce You Financially Fit. We'll talk about it a little bit later. That's on Amazon. That talks about many of these issues we're going to be talking about here. And one idea that clients have used is to identify certain expenses that are non-discretionary. In other words, they have to be paid, right?
Right.
Your rent or your mortgage, possibly car payments, certainly food, maybe your pet, you're sharing a dog or cat, all those kinds of expenses. Insurance would be in
Hmm.
that category, possibly health insurance, depending on whether or not both of you are working. and contribute to that account in proportion to your income. So if he's making twice as much or she's making twice as much, doesn't matter which one, then one party is contributing a third, the other party is contributing 2/3. Again, a great role for a financial planner to be involved and in talking about these things. Sharing passwords, something as simple as that. Talking about your list of accounts. What happens if one of you is disabled,
Right.
incapacitated, you have COVID and you're on a ventilator, especially if you're not married yet or you're cohabitating? What kinds of ways, are you going to be able to keep things moving? And in the next slide, I'm going to talk about, well, we can just go to the next slide. But discretionary spending would be outside the joint bank account. You would keep your own account and do things like haircuts, girls' night out, boys' night out, golf outings, maybe your tennis lessons. Those would be outside and just come from your own income. And over time, it might change where the joint account becomes bigger or smaller. But what I'm talking about for asset protection, someone gets sick and they're in the hospital and you can't go see them because you're not married yet. Married spouses can generally go see somebody in the hospital. What you may want to consider are things like wills and durable powers of attorney. What does your will say? Who has the power over your money if you become incapacitated? Have you thought about, well, what if there's a breakup? What are you already tied together with? And what happens if you break up? What's your insurance look like? Who has health insurance? Are you on your partner's health insurance? Where's your home, auto, life insurance? Do you have enough life insurance if something would happen to you? And you have spending that's, you own a house together, you're cohabitating. What does that look like?
Yeah.
Again, more conversations to have with a financial planner. A lot of people are asking these days, should I have a prenup? People are getting married later in life. They have their own money. They might have inherited money. Really getting a good understanding of what separate property is before you get married is important, because the law has rules for how money is split in divorce. And while the laws are the minimum standard, you should know what those laws are and potentially have a prenup or a postnup that changes those laws to fit your unique financial situation. Generally speaking, separate property is what you inherit or what you had before your marriage. How are you going to define that? Do you actually want that in an agreement? And the biggest misunderstanding, I think, about marital agreements is that people think everything has to be in the agreement, all your accounts, all your assets. And really, it can just be, say, the house. So say you're moving into your future husband's house. Well, that's really a separate property because he owned it before marriage. And what if you're married for 10 years and you're kind of both paying the mortgage and you're both working, or even if you're a stay-at-home mom, what's going to happen to that house? Because under the law, the rules aren't that great for the person who moves into someone else's separate property house. But maybe you want to set other rules for how you want that to look. So thinking about these things ahead of time is really important. If you do decide to have a pre or post-nup, make sure you update it. Just like a will, if what's in it doesn't really relate to what's in it by the time you have a problem or you want to exercise the agreement's just going to be thrown out, which is why a lot of attorneys won't even consider writing a prenuptial agreement, because people don't update them.
And so when you're talking here, let's say, I own a house and my partner decides to move in with me and we live together for a while, we can make a prenup saying this is our house, even though my name is on it.
Sure, you can have it's a contract like any other. People get confused. A postnup, prenup, or what's now called a no-nup is really just a contract. What you're saying is, if we split up, this is what you're going to get from the house, this is what I'm going to get from the house. This is how we're going to share in the growth. It has nothing to do with the ownership per se. It's just a contract about the economics. You can go further than that. You can talk about the ownership, but that's what, lawyers and financial planners are to help you sort through.
Because sometimes it seems like those very separated, like that's yours and this is mine, where this is almost can change that and be like, actually, this is ours. And we both recognize that.
It can, it can be a very generous thing to do, a post or prenup. People think it's a protective thing to do for the person who has more money. And that's just because we all watch too much TV.
That's why I like to kind of talk about these things, because sometimes they do have such a negative connotation and very much like I'm keeping mine, you're keeping yours, and we're not crossing that line, where this seems more of an opportunity, like you said, to be generous, to share, and to just have those conversations up front, which I like that kind of twist of making it a much more generous, communicative,
Yeah,
agreement.
it's a way to be transparent. It's a way to be um, understanding of your future spouse's needs or
Yeah,
cohabitants' needs, and what their expectations are, so that you're not surprised later on. You know what
right.
the rule is because you set them yourselves. Otherwise, the government sets those, actually the state government sets those rules for you, and that may not fit your unique financial situation. Those rules were meant for everybody, which means they fit no one.
For
So
sure.
getting some education about separate property, some education about I like to call them marital agreements. It seems better than
Mhm.
prenup and postnup. But marital agreements, getting some understanding about those, even spending an hour with an attorney and paying them to say, I just have some questions, is worth your
Right,
time and money.
right.
Um, and don't forget if you do have one, don't forget to update it, because that's where they fall apart. The house you mentioned in the contract is now a different house.
Mhm.
Um, but really this is what I've said all along in the presentation, Maggie, is just bring a financial planner into the conversation. Some people are so touchy about money, they fight over the nickel that's in the cushions of the couch. And I don't want that to be you and your spouse. You need to have because you do have to have these conversations. Bring financial, are you saving for a house? How is it that you invest? Are you using your 401k at work? What is your match? All those kinds of things. What is it that you plan to do with these funds? Is that for your retirement? Is that for some other purpose, education? Some people have these really large student loans. How are we going to deal with it?
Mhm.
If we get married, is that going to be yours if we get divorced? Or are we going to have to split it? If you're taking
Right.
on a loan during marriage, by the way, a student loan, what's going to happen in case of divorce? I mean, divorce is like any other risk. Your house could set on fire. We have insurance
Mhm.
for that, right? We can go buy homeowners insurance. There is no insurance for things like who's going to take care of your student debt. The state may look at it one way and you want to look at it another if you don't have some kind of agreement in place. And I'm not just saying a verbal agreement. If you don't have
Right.
something on a piece of paper, part of that student loan may be yours if it was taken on during the marriage. It depends on the state that you live in.
Mhm.
So lots of education is needed. Of course, all of that is in my book. I Now Pronounce You Financially Fit: How to Protect Your Money in Marriage and Divorce. Um, about marital agreements, asset protection. When I say asset protection, it sounds like trusts. So I don't really just mean that. I mean everything simple as health insurance, car insurance, homeowners insurance, these kinds of asset protection. Insurance is asset protection, making sure that if
Mhm.
something unusual and bad happens, that you're protected. Um, Estate planning documents, your will, your powers of attorney for medical, sometimes called a living will in some states. Um, who's going to take care of you if you're in the hospital and someone's got to make decisions about you and you're on a ventilator? You can't make your own decisions. What's going to happen if you pass away? It's thoughtful to do for you and your loved ones. And then, the greatest part of being a financial planner is I get to be someone's coach and help monitor whether they're doing some of these things, getting these tasks accomplished. And I have a range of clients. Some are all about the list and they like checking things off. And some are like, you told me to do that last year and I still haven't done it. I'm probably even myself somewhere in between those two extremes. But knowing that these are things that are out there that are part of your good financial hygiene and
Mhm.
financial fitness, I mean, it's just where my heart is. It's what I want people. I want people to be doing the right thing for their partner and have a financially healthy relationship.
Definitely. Yeah, especially those powers of attorneys and things like that. I was just talking to someone this morning who 10 days after they got married, the wife went into they had to put her into a coma because she was so ill. And so it's just one of those things where it was, we had these conversations, he explained before they even got married and talked to their financial professional and updated these things. So as soon as they were married, he was able to be that power of attorney and those different people to her, which, you always kind of push off. I know I would, and, be like, well, at least we'll get it done in the first year.
Right.
But clearly they needed it in those first 10 days. So it's you really want to be proactive on these things.
As best you can. And
Yeah.
and it's and look at it as not, morbid or thinking about the worst. Look at it as
Right.
being kind to yourself, kind to your loved ones, to really consider these potential outcomes. I mean, we think about a health scare or a house setting on fire or the pipes bursting, but a health crisis that puts you in the hospital causes you to be unable to move your own financial life forward. I mean,
Hmm.
that's the only way to protect yourself is through these contracts.
Right, right. Are these your books then you want to share
So,
with
yeah,
us?
let me share a little bit about the books. In 2015, I wrote I Now Pronounce You Financially Fit: How to Protect Your Money in Marriage and Divorce. The first half of the book is truly about managing money as a couple, and I do that through telling stories from my practice. Lots of stories from people doing postnups. We had a couple who, one was a tech executive, and he and his wife suddenly became these big investors. And then she started understanding the business really well. And then she wanted to make these really big investments in these risky deals. And he was like, whoa, wait a minute. We don't want to go that much risk. He was like, wait a minute. I don't want to do this. Well, we go to find out as he's sitting next to me. Um, I asked him about his family. Like, how'd you grow up around money? They
Hmm.
had a family farm that went bankrupt. There was a lot of financial stress in his family life, and so I got a better understanding of where he was coming from. And so
Right.
I said, "Hey," he wanted a divorce. He's like, "I got to get divorced. She's just spending all the money on these investments that are super risky." And I said, "Well, wait a minute. There's other solutions here.
Right.
How do you feel about the relationship, not just the money?" And he said, "Well, I actually want to stay married, but she can't keep spending the money." And so we did a postnuptial agreement in Texas. Is slightly different phrase for what we did, but we separated some of the assets so that she had her bucket to go make investments and he had his buckets to stay safe.
That's very
So there's
smart.
stories like that in the book that help illustrate the kind of concepts we've been talking about the last few minutes. I updated the book in 2018 because there were some big tax law changes
Mm.
at that time, so it made sense to update the book. So the newest edition. So be careful if you go buy an old one on Amazon. Get the newer edition because it's more updated for tax law. And there's some education about taxes. There's education about insurance. There's education about, of course, estate plans and powers of attorney and the importance there. Just this past year in November, I released Financially Fit Divorce, more stories from my divorce practice because I do work with clients as an analyst on their divorce cases. I'm in Texas. It's more financial planning oriented because there are certain rules if you're going to fall under the rules. In other states, it's sort of a wider set of rules, I would
Mhm.
describe it, but tried to write it from the perspective of everybody. This is what you need to focus on if there's going to be a divorce or when there is a divorce. So highly recommend the book for people who, it's the worst time to send someone off to go study something when they're so stressed about the relationship and the relationships end. But it's one of the most important times to protect your financial health is during a
Yeah.
divorce, because you don't want to make a mistake that can last a lifetime, because mistakes that you make compound. Money compounds over time because it could have been invested. That mistake gets compounded over time. So it is one of the most important times to have really good financial education and
Yeah.
negotiation
Totally.
skills too. So some of that's in the book.
Awesome. We'll have to, and those are both on Amazon, right?
Those are both on Amazon. You can go get there directly by going to financiallyfitdivorce.com. There's also a course for financially fit divorce. There's a online course that you can take. There's no exams or finals to take there. It's
I
just
like that. I like that.
we're not making you memorize anything, but really good hints on how to successfully navigate financially your divorce, and some non-financial too.
Definitely. Yeah, you guys will want to pick those books up for sure.
And just full disclosure, I have a prenup. I was married 9 years ago now, and some of this is based on even my experience of writing a prenup and going through that. And the best experience I had was when Mitch, my husband, looked over at me and he said, "I'm so glad we have a prenup." And I looked at him like, What are we talking about?" Because it was not even in the context of a financial conversation. And he said, well, in my previous relationship, I never knew what anyone was thinking about money. And we're on the same page now. We know what our
Yeah.
goals are and the agreements written around those goals. And I'm really glad we have that. So it can be a very positive thing to create an agreement. We'll call it a marital agreement, so it's not as stressful. And set your own rules that fit you, not the rules that fit your state.
Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate you sharing that, as you know, a lot of people don't want to talk about it. But it also is not just in case we get divorced, and we don't want the whole marriage to be based around if divorced, but it's just that our goals are aligned, that we've had these conversations, and to protect our family. And I know especially when it comes to, let's say, a second marriage, and if there are kids coming from a previous marriage, you need to make sure some of those assets maybe belong to your children versus, the whole house or something like that. So
Exactly. I mean, these are, if we could cover all the issues in a half an hour. I actually didn't ask you how much time we have. I think we have a half an hour.
yeah,
But, it's a reason to hire a financial planner and potentially even talk to an attorney. If you believe that your spouse or future spouse or even cohabitant has wealthy parents, or you have wealthy
yeah,
parents, they're going to start getting involved or want to get involved in your financial life. And how much do you really know about your parents? So many times people will come to me and say, well, I don't really know what my parents have, but we think it's significant. And I'm like, well, maybe it's time to have that conversation. They're in their 80s,
yeah, yeah,
or 70s even. I mean, really things can happen. Maybe it's time that you did know exactly what's going on and have a serious financial conversation with your parents, because it affects our relationship, right? It's going to affect your
right.
relationship to know what those resources are, um, good or bad.
Hmm.
Could go the other way too. If you have, you might think someone's parents are well off and they turn out to need your help when they get
Right.
older. You want to be financially prepared for that as well. So these conversations couldn't be more critical.
Yeah, conversations with parents are another big one that we try to push, and I know are not always the easiest because sometimes parents don't want to be, parented by their kids or still keep it a bit private, but they are essential conversations, especially when your child is then growing their life and making their financial plans. We really just want the best for everybody.
Exactly. And Maggie, I couldn't say enough nice things about purse strings and how you're bringing all this great information to people, particularly women who may be, hesitant because money is a tricky subject to talk about.
Yeah,
Let's take the sting out of talking about money. Let's find ways to communicate about money effectively. It's really just a tool. It's not an
right.
emotion. Money is just a tool to get us to where we're going, to meet some financial goals that we have for our lives. And talking about it isn't scary once you get started, like most things.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah, and I appreciate that, and I really liked how you pointed out how much a financial planner can help you just in these conversations, because they can bring up those extra questions or help understand different perspectives, and then bring to light, what we want and what we actually have and what the difference is there and how to make those dreams come true, because sometimes it's just best to have that third party there as well to help you bring that conversation together.
Exactly.
Awesome. This has been wonderful. Let me see if there are any questions coming in. Do you have one more slide?
I think that's it. I think I'm
Okay.
good. I'll leave that up there. Or if we can, or
Alrighty.
you can take it down if you need.
But no, but this has been a ton of great information, and your email has been going through the bottom,
Mhm.
and so I know you have your CDFA. You focus on helping people, through that divorce transition, but I know you also have multiple clients that are happily married and also, working on their financial goals as well. So,
And
um,
by the way, nearly everything in here applies to single
right.
women, or men or women. I mean, especially those powers of attorney are important for single people, uh, and even for if you have kids in college, they're
Yeah.
adult age now. They need a power of attorney, so that if something happens to them, you can help step in for their financial life. So talk to an estate planning attorney about even your 19-year-old child
Yeah.
or anyone in your life who's single. It's so much more important for them because, well, they're on their own, and having someone step in and make sure the bills are paid while they're incapacitated is super important.
Definitely. Yeah, I know Barb and I, that was our mission about a year and a half ago, because we both had to get all that stuff in line. And because we have to practice what we preach as well. And I did sit
Exactly.
down with my brother and my sister, and I'm both like, you're one, you're the other, just so you know that you're prepared. They're both actually really flattered and excited about it. So I said, don't get carried away here. I'm
Yeah.
healthy and well right now. But make sure everyone knows the plan as well, just to be sure, because it doesn't always have to be your partner or a parent. It can be your siblings or just a good friend. Someone's going to need to be there for you, and just make sure that person knows
Yeah,
that they
especially
are.
with this COVID, I think it highlighted the necessity. We did have parents who couldn't go see, well, in one case, we had a parent who couldn't go see his daughter because
Hmm.
she was adult age and there was no power of attorney, medical in that case, for him to be able to go see her. No one was able to pay her bills
Oh,
or get into her bank accounts. And there's other ways to, other than a power of attorney, to get into someone's bank account. That's a whole other presentation we could do another time. Uh, but certainly making sure that your financial life can continue if for whatever reason temporarily you can't manage
right.
that financial life. And that's almost always a medical reason that you can't do that.
Yeah,
Um, but it's an important thing to have.
definitely. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing this valuable information. There's such great conversations for us to have, no matter where we are in our marriage or not marriage journey, just conversations we need to be having with ourselves and with our partners. So please, don't hesitate to reach out to Pam. I know she's happy to help. And everyone through Purse Strings has a free, 20 to 30-minute conversation just to make sure it's a good fit for everybody. So Pam, you could reach her at pam.friedman@rscapital.com. She's also one of our Purse Strings approved professionals, so you can check her out on our site, pursestrings.co. Yeah, pick up her book while you're at it. I just got the I Now Pronounce You Financially Fit, and I give it a good review. And so,
Thanks.
yeah, I'm excited to finish the other half of the book.
Yeah, no, I look forward to talking to any and all of you. I'll send you a link to my scheduler if you email me, and we'll find some time to talk on Zoom. And if you're in
Perfect.
Austin, Texas, you can come by the office.
There you go. I bet it's very hot over there right now.
It is. Wow.
Yeah,
Everywhere it's hot, no matter where you
I
go.
that's true. That's true. Well, thank you again, Pam, and we'll talk to everyone again next week. All right,
Thanks,
bye bye.
Maggie. Bye, everybody.